and pars tensa, and the annulus, or fibrous outer ring. 3 parts of the malleus, the umbo, manubrium, and short process, show through the tympanic membrane, and a prominent cone of light is reflected in the antero-inferior quadrant. The tympanic membrane leads to the middle ear, which conducts sound to the inner ear via 3 ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes. The eustachian tube connects the middle ear and nasopharynx. The inner ear contains the semicircular canals, cochlea, and acoustic nerve, or cranial nerve 8. These structures hold the sensory organs for hearing and balance.
Right, so we're going to begin your exam for someone.
When the person is ready, begin the head examination by noting the general size and shape of her skull. It should be round, symmetrical, and in proportion to the rest of her body.
Now I'm going to examine your head.
Next, palpate her scalp and skull, which should feel smooth and symmetrical. Particularly note any deformities, lumps, or tenderness. Now slide your fingers to the temporomandibular joint, just anterior to the tragus. As the person opens and closes her mouth, palpate the joint, which normally moves smoothly and freely without tenderness.
Close.
They have like a lockjaw, like people that, I don't know, they move a little bit more. I don't know, anybody have lockjaw or rigidity there? When you examine them, you can actually feel it. Like if they speak, you'll feel like a little bouncing of it. I snore and I grind my teeth, so if someone were examining me, it would be real, like you'll feel like a tremor somehow in your jaw.
Have you been having any headaches recently?
Yes.
When inspecting the person's face, note the facial expression, which should be appropriate for her behavior and reported mood.
Is it sharp or dull?
It's a dull.
Observe for facial symmetry as the person speaks and moves. You should see symmetry of the eyebrows, palpebral fissures, nasolabial folds, and sides of the mouth.
No problem.
Okay, have you had your eyes
Also
checked?
note any tics, edema, or lesions, which signal an abnormality.
Contacts or
Yes, I
glasses?
do. I wear contacts. Is it normally this slow?
Yes.
Have you been having any headaches recently?
Yes.
When inspecting the person's face, note the facial expression, which should be appropriate for her behavior and reported mood.
Is it sharp or dull? Okay, so we're ready to begin your eye exam. So I'm going to have you stand on the floor. I'm going to give you this
To test visual acuity, have the person stand 20 feet from the Snellen eye chart and hold a card over one eye.
and read the smallest line you can
If
read.
she wears contact lenses or glasses other than reading glasses, tell her to keep them on. Ask her to read the smallest line of letters possible.
Please cover the other eye.
Then have her cover the other eye and read that line of letters backward.
C.
Normal visual acuity is 20/20, which means that the person can read at 20 feet what normal eyes can read at that distance. Now test visual fields by performing the confrontation test. Stand about 2 feet from the person at eye level.
Cover your eye with a card. I'm going to cover mine. Then I'm going to wiggle my fingers to the side of your head. You let me know.
Have
if
her
you see
cover
this.
one eye and look at you.
Cover your.
Hold your finger midway between you and the person. Ask her to say now as soon as she sees it move in from the periphery.
Now.
Then flick your finger as you move it in through each visual field. For the temporal field, start with your finger somewhat behind the person. Normally, she should see your finger at the same time you do. And and in relation to the anteroposterior axis of her eye, she should see your finger at about 50 degrees superiorly, 60 degrees nasally, 90 degrees temporally, and 70 degrees inferiorly.
Yalitza, quiero que te lo aprendas de memoria para que me ayudes, güey.
Ya me tengo que 90, 70, 50, 40.
Ándale, 40, 60, 25, 37, 28.
Okay, so we're ready to begin your eye exam, so I'm gonna now I'm gonna take a look at your ears. Turn your head to your left.
For this part of the examination, begin by inspecting the external ears.
And back to the center.
Normally, they are equal in size. Match the color of the person's facial skin and show no lumps or lesions.
Do you feel any tenderness when I pull on this?
No.
Next, move the pinna and push on the tragus.
Down.
They should feel firm, and movement should produce no pain. Now palpate the mastoid process, which also should cause no pain.
Tenderness here?
No.
Then inspect the external auditory meatus, which should have no swelling, redness, or discharge. Based on the size of the meatus, choose the proper size speculum and attach it to the otoscope for internal ear inspection. Tilt the person's head slightly away from you. To straighten the ear canal, gently but firmly pull the pinna up and back.
Now we're gonna check your ears.
For a child under age 3, pull the pinna down to straighten the ear canal. Hold the otoscope upside down along your fingers and brace the back of your hand against the person's cheek to steady the otoscope. Then insert the speculum carefully into the ear canal, which should appear patent. It may have some cerumen, but should have no redness, swelling, lesions, foreign bodies, or discharge. Next, observe the eardrum, which normally appears shiny, translucent, and pearly gray. Its cone-shaped light reflex should appear in the antero-inferior quadrant. The umbo, manubrium, and short process should be visible through the eardrum. At the edge, the annulus should look whiter and denser.
Everything looks fine in that ear. Now I'm gonna check the other one.
The entire eardrum should be flat and have no perforations. To test the person's hearing acuity, begin with the voice
All right,
test.
so I'm gonna give you some words to repeat after me. But first, put your fingers in your right ear and wiggle them gently.
Mask the hearing in one ear by placing your finger on the person's tragus and rapidly pushing it in and out, or having her do this with her finger.
Football.
Then test the other
Put it
ear
on the other
by
side.
whispering some 2-syllable words from 1 to 2 feet away. Normally, the person correctly repeats each word after you say it.
Ping pong.
Airplane.
Airplane.
Then perform the Weber test.
Okay, Sue, I'm gonna do a few more hearing tests.
Place a vibrating tuning fork in the middle of the person's skull and ask where she hears the sound. She should hear it by bone conduction equally loud in both ears.
Let me know when you don't hear this.
Also perform the Rinne test. Place the stem of a vibrating tuning fork on the person's mastoid process and ask her to signal when the sound stops. When she gives the signal,
Good.
quickly
Same
invert the
on
fork,
the other side.
hold the vibrating end near her ear canal, and ask if she can still hear it. Normally, she should hear sound twice as long by air conduction near her ear as she can by bone conduction through her mastoid process.
Now.
This normal response is a positive Rinne test.
get the lights for me? Slowly.
Mhm.